Hello, and I'm your host, Cohen Vogel, and for today's special guest, that's my friend, Abe Wieland. Now for your weekly tidbit of news, it's that snails can sleep for 3 years. Now for our special guest, Abe Wieland. Now, Abe, was it difficult to become valedictorian?
Certainly. Becoming valedictorian was sort of just a general process that occurred over a long time. I wasn't actually looking for it, especially not early on. Freshman, sophomore, and junior years, I was just worried about getting good grades, doing well in my classes, taking classes that challenged me, and that sort of thing. And then by senior year, I noticed that my class rank was consistently pretty high, so at that point it became a little bit of a challenge for myself to become valedictorian. But really, I would say for anyone out there, I wouldn't recommend looking for valedictorian, because if you do, you're probably going to miss part of the excitement of schooling. Instead, I was far more happy to just sort of have it occur naturally. I really enjoyed school on its own and was working hard in classes and taking things that challenged myself. And then good grades just kind of happened, and valedictorian was just sort of an extra reward, I guess.
Was Harvard your first pick of colleges?
It actually wasn't. Since 8th grade or so, I had been dead set on MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, which is right down the street from Harvard, actually, but focuses more on technology. And I applied to them early in November of my senior year, and I got a decision in December, and they said, we're going to tell you in March. Basically, they deferred me to the spring action time. So then I had to really scramble in January and apply to a whole bunch of other places. So I applied to some other big tech schools like Stanford and Carnegie Mellon and Caltech. And I also applied to a couple backup schools, some more local places. And then at the last minute, I just thought, you know what, let's just throw Harvard in the mix. And it's wonderful that I did, because I got accepted to those sort of backup schools, but other than that, Harvard was the only place that accepted me, actually. MIT, Stanford, Carnegie Mellon, Caltech, all those locations rejected me. So it was great. And of course, Harvard is a wonderful second, so I'm certainly not displeased.
Okay, and now, what's the major you want to go into?
Yeah, I probably want to go to computer science, or electrical engineering, or math. I haven't fully decided, but luckily Harvard doesn't make me decide until sophomore year. They call it a concentration, but whatever, it's basically a major. They don't make you declare it until sophomore year. So you have all of freshman year to get some of your required classes out of the way, and at the same time kind of get a feeling for what that major is going to look like. And maybe you want to change it, who knows, maybe it might change.
Okay, now, what's your favorite play that you've ever seen or been in?
It's really unfortunate that we weren't able to do it this year, because I want to say that Into the Woods is probably my favorite play. Regardless, I haven't played in it now. I haven't acted in it. I was going to, but COVID came around. But I just love the way that they mix all the fairy tales together, and Sondheim does an excellent job with the lyrics. They're very clever. So I would have to say Into the Woods. Okay,
now what's your favorite character that you've ever been in a play or musical?
For that, I would probably have to say Sheridan Whiteside from The Man Who Came to Dinner. It was the fall play of my senior year. It was the biggest role that I played, but it was very challenging, because I had to remember a lot of lines. I was responsible typically for bringing people on and off stage that were waiting for my cue, and I also had a lot of longer lines than I'd ever said before. I had this whole long story about whatever it was called, some detention facility, and you can see I really remember those lines, right? But I really enjoyed, it was really fun, so it was really challenging to get all that together, but it was really fun to be grouchy all the time, to be mean all the time, and it was also pretty fun to be on stage a lot of the time.
Okay, now we'll be right back with Abe after this short break. Here's 30 Seconds of Nature.
doing?
Now we're going to finish the interview with my friend, Abe Wieland. What's your favorite book?
Well, my favorite genre is easier to answer. I definitely like fantasy or high fantasy, whichever you like to call it. And so the thing about this genre is there's often long series in them. And so I would have to say probably a series rather than a single book, but it would probably have to be Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time series. I also really love a lot of other fantasy and fiction things, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, the Aragon series, but I have to say the Wheel of Time is probably my favorite one.
Okay, and what are some of your hobbies?
Yeah, probably my main hobby is computer programming. In some of my spare time, I've liked to do these challenges called Project Euler, they're available online. They're sort of upper-level math problems that require a little bit of programming behind them to solve. So you can usually simplify them a little bit using math, and then at some point you have to turn to programming to solve them the rest of the way. So I really enjoyed those, but they are very challenging, but I always like a challenge, so that's enjoyable as well. I guess I also like exercising occasionally, riding bike, that sort of thing. I do really like a good bike ride, but programming is probably my biggest hobby.
Okay, and do you have any advice to give to people?
Well, I don't know that I'm old enough or wise enough to be in a position of offering advice, but I guess I have a little bit of, maybe some little regrets or advice about high school. I would say, well, first off, challenge yourself. It's very important to take classes that even if you don't think that you're going to get the best grade in them, you're going to learn so much more in an upper level class than you would in a general level class. So obviously don't take classes that are way beyond your level. Don't try and jump into things when you haven't taken prerequisites, but in general, if you can, challenge yourself. And my second piece of advice is look beyond the course listings at Central. I sort of got into a rut in that, so I took a lot of AP classes, but I sort of got into the mindset that I could only take the AP classes that were offered at Central. But there's a lot of other options. You can take a lot of AP classes online. And so things like AP Physics or something like that, which is a little bit more up my alley, I would have maybe rather taken than AP History or something like that. But it definitely depends on your interests. But once you find that interest area, obviously it's good to have a very broad education as well. So I encourage taking as many APs as you can. But I would say if you're really interested in one particular area, try and take some online APs as well.
Okay. Well, that's all the time we have with our special guest. So thank you for chatting with me today.
Well, yeah, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. For my book recommendation this week, I'm recommending this book, The Wings of Fire, The Dragonette Prophecy. It's by Tui T. Sutherland, and it's a pretty good series. It's about 13 books in the actual series, and there's a few other extra books that you can get. But it's a pretty good book all around, and a great series. Now, for my adventure this week, I watched my sister play tennis for an entire day. I'm your host, Cohen Vogel, signing off.